Happy birthday, Retrospectors. This show is 5 years old.
And we're an independent show that relies on your support to keep going.
So help us fund future episodes and get exclusive content at patreon.com/retrospectors.
That's patreon.com/retrospectors.
It's May 20th, 1873, and another remarkable event is about to be uncovered by Arion, Rebecca, and Olly, the Retrospectors.
The invention of jeans. Riveted denim work pants, which you are quite likely to be wearing right now as you listen to this, can be traced back to today in history in 1873, when a certain Mr. Levi Strauss received a US patent, number 139121, for improvement in fastening pocket openings. But although Levi's is the brand that lasted, obviously, it was actually his co-patentee, Jacob Davis, who'd come up with the idea.
Yeah, Jacob Davis was a Russian Jewish immigrant who'd settled in Nevada, and he bought his canvas and his denim from Levi Strauss, who had a wholesale store in San Francisco. And he had approached him saying that basically he'd invented these cool new pants. You know, like people out west had to develop specific talents in response to the demands of life out on the frontier. And we often hear the story that jeans were developed for gold miners, because obviously this is gold rush times, but it was actually apparently a woodcutter's wife who originally approached Davis and asked if there was some way to make her husband's trousers more hard-wearing. She was obviously fed up of mending them. And he had already got into the habit of using copper rivets to reinforce stitching on various items. You know, he made tents and things as well. But this was the first time he was using them specifically to develop a new style of trouser. And his first versions were made of cotton duck, which is this plain fabric. It's quite similar to canvas. Within a few months, he was making them with denim too. And they became so popular, not just with woodcutters, but with miners, with railway workers, that they outstripped his own ability to make them as an individual. So he decided to approach Strauss as his fabric supplier and see if he might be interested in going into business together. And obviously, Levi Strauss immediately spotted this was a great opportunity and said yes.
Yeah, Strauss was a Bavarian immigrant, and he had built up his own successful wholesale business during the California gold rush era. He'd actually worked just as a peddler of goods from his brother's store starting off. He was going town to town selling kettles and blankets and sewing goods, and also then began eventually to sell his own wholesale dry goods, as they were called, under his own name. His company supplied clothing, fabric, and other products to a growing network of small stores across California and the wider West. And it was really serving these booming communities of gold miners and settlers that were coming to the area. And by 1866, he'd moved into larger premises and had become both a prominent businessman and an active supporter of San Francisco's Jewish community. But his future business partner, Jacob Davis, he was a tailor who was based in Reno, Nevada, and he'd actually been, as Rebecca said, one of Strauss's regular customers. And so in 1872, he wrote to Strauss basically describing this thing that he'd come up with, but because he didn't have the money himself to secure a patent, he suggested, why doesn't Strauss finance the process and share ownership? And that was why Strauss agreed to it and ultimately profited enormously by having his name eternally associated with the thing that ultimately some other guy pretty much created.
Yeah, I mean, it would be hard to imagine a counter-narrative where Strauss would have opened that letter and be like, ah.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, but it's possible, isn't it? But, like, it seems so obvious now that someone's written to you saying, I've invented Levi's. I'm willing to share the profits with you because I'm using your supply. I mean, he's going to buy them from him anyway. All he's asking for is, can you stump up the money for the patent? And forever, you can have 50% of the invention which I make by buying your cloth. Like, it seems like, of course, he'd say yes. Yeah. But this could have just gone in the bin. Like, Levi Strauss was a very successful entrepreneur. He could have imagined that his business limitations went no further than California and he had no interest in what's going on in Nevada and some guy putting copper rivets on his trousers. He might have thought to himself, well, yeah, that is a good idea. I'll put copper rivets on the trousers myself. What are you going to do about it? It's not that great. Do you know what I mean? It's just putting copper on them. But he didn't. He went into business. And I think being Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe and having this background of basically being peddlers, which is what you're allowed to be in 19th century Bavaria, meant that they had this kind of vision for not just the gold rush, which is what every migrant in America was doing at the time, but how can we service the people that are attending the gold rush? It's a sort of B2B market. Instead of trying to dig for gold, we'll sell the stuff that the gold diggers need, like trousers that don't fall apart.
Yeah, and Strauss really invested hard in this because by the time that the patent was issued, he'd already set up a tailoring shop in San Francisco specifically to mass produce these jeans. The original design had 2 front pockets and 1 rear pocket, with the little front watch pocket added a few years later. And actually, the second rear pocket wasn't added until 1901. And it's like, so we would call these jeans, but the word jeans was actually already in use at the time, but it was used very broadly to describe any kind of blue denim working clothing. So you could use it to describe overalls or a shirt. Basically, it had originated as working clothing much earlier than you think, actually. In 16th century Genoa, this blue indigo dyed woven cotton cloth, it was very common as workwear in the city-state, and it was part of the uniform of its sailors. And Genoa was a major sailing power of the day, so its sailors were familiar across the world. And the word jeans itself is thought to come from the French name for Genoa, which is Gênes. And then denim was also a French invention because it comes from the French town of Nîmes, whose weavers then tried to develop and export their own version of that fabric. It was a bit coarser and therefore it was more valuable as workwear. And jean was originally used as an adjective for this kind of coarse blue cotton. So someone might refer to, jean cotton trousers. They meant this kind of coarse blue fabric. It first appeared in print as jeans as a noun in 1795, but between 1795 and 1873, when Levi Strauss filed his patent, the term jeans could be used pretty much for anything. So people weren't picturing someone walking down the street in a pair of tight blue jeans. And that's the other thing, they weren't tight either. This was workwear, so they were not intended to be form-fitting. You would not look at these and think, I can't wait to get these on, like get down the dance hall. These were very much baggy, rough working clothes.
Yeah, to the extent that you might even leave them where you were wearing them at work. People in the mines would take them off and leave them there when they were done for the day. This was definitely not something you wear home.
Yeah, the patent that they filed gave them exclusive rights to use metal rivets in garment construction. And for decades, that remained the cornerstone of their business. And if you were someone who had been used to wearing any sort of jeans in your working life, then you could understand why getting the toughest, hardiest ones that are on the market would be the thing that you'd do. And that's why they really took off. And by the early 20th century, Levi Strauss & Co., as it became known, was producing what would become the modern 5-pocket jean design. And by mid-century, then denim jeans had managed to make that leap from workwear into youth culture and fashion, and eventually the global uniform that we are all wearing probably right now across class and geography. But it really did start with the fact that Levi Strauss had managed to build the ultimate version that meant that people who were using them in their working life couldn't accept any other model.
Yeah, except, of course, the patent did run out, and it ran out sooner in those days than it would do now. It was like 20 years or something, 25 years. So actually, they had this very clear window in which to establish themselves, and then had to think, as savvy business people, right, how do we make sure that once the patent's out, because during that window, they were suing people. They were quite litigious if anyone produced something similar. But once that window closes, how are we going to continue to be what would become Levi's? And so they came up with the 2 horses logo on the back of the jeans, which I'd never actually looked at until today. I sort of am dimly aware of what the back of a pair of Levi's looks like. That logo has been there since 1886. And it portrays 2 horses racing in opposite directions, trying to tear apart a pair of jeans in the middle. So it's saying, our jeans are so strong, even horses can't separate them. And the concept behind that was, a lot of these guys going down the mines, they don't speak English. They're from Mexico and Latin America. How do we explain what the product is? This is a visual way of explaining, but at the same time, a sense of what would make this stick out on the shelf when everyone's making jeans. So you had the red tab on the back eventually, which has no function at all. It's just there so that when you see someone's bum, that's Levi's. You had the stitching on the pocket, which again is purely for fashion, doesn't do anything. It's all about brand identity, so no one can copy that.
Yeah, and they didn't start calling the product jeans until 1960. Until then, they referred to them as waist overalls. Again, going back to that earlier, more broad definition of jeans, obviously wasn't felt to be specific enough when the product was first introduced. You had to tell people, by the way, these are not going to go all the way up to your chin, if that's what you're thinking. These are strictly waist overalls. But, they remained strictly workwear. I mean, they were incredibly popular. When Strauss died in 1902, age 73, he was worth $30 million, and that's in 1902 dollars. workers, and he left the company to his nephews, and it continued to be popular. But yeah, until World War II, strictly as workwear, associated with tough manual labour, with men specifically. But then obviously you had millions of women being drawn into workplaces like factories and farms. They became jean aficionados. And in fact, in the 40s, women's jeans were made with the zipper fly at the side because it was considered vulgar or unfeminine to draw the eye to the crotch. The first Levi's with a zipper were women's jeans, again, similar to the way that skirts would zip up at the side. They weren't added to men's jeans until 1954, which did apparently set off a bit of a minor schism with consumers who preferred the classic button-up style. And also they'd become popular for children's play outfits because they were so hard-wearing. And as those children became teens, they often continued to wear jeans for casual wear, which sort of leads into that 1950s youth revolution in blue jeans.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose in fashion terms, it's always ebbed and flowed, hasn't it? Obviously, you get Springsteen in the 80s on the cover of Born in the USA, gives a massive revival again. It's become the kind of classic American look, really, to the extent that original pairs of Levi's are worth a hell of a lot of money. Occasionally, an old gold mine gets dug up, and there's an old pair of Levi's still there, because the miners just used to throw them on the floor when their shift finished, and if the mine never reopened again, they've been there for 100 years. Wow. One pair has been found and auctioned for $87,400,
wow,
which is worth more literally than its weight in gold. If you'd gone down there and mined that much gold in 1900, the jeans that you were wearing would be worth more now.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a good fact, isn't it?
To hear more from us on this topic, join Club Retrospectors now. Unlock our weekly bonus bits at patreon.com/retrospectors.